More than 2 years into the N64 era, and 1 month before Zelda Ocarina of Time, a game was released. This game had gameplay mechanics decades ahead of its time, hosted more than 20 playable characters, and got a 9.5 out of 10 from IGN. Yet it still managed to sell terribly, and was largely dwarfed by other N64 games of its era. And what if I told you that this game was made by Rockstar Games, the creators of Grand Theft Auto? Meet Space Station Silicon Valley. Buckle in because this one is strange. You play as a computer chip. Yes, a computer chip. You see, after crash landing on a floating science experiment gone wrong, our robotic protagonist is exploded into pieces and his CPU chip is all that remains. But what we learn about the spacecraft that we landed on is that all the animals here are robotic life forms, and so by attaching himself to them, Evo, our computer chip, can possess these creatures and use them for his benefit. You take over a variety of creatures from bouncing sheep, to polar bear tanks, to motorcycle hyenas strapped with missile launchers. And you'll use them to fight other animals and solve platformer puzzles. So recently, I realized that this game was not actually a fever dream, but was a game from my childhood. And I got to thinking, this game was so ambitious and unique, but it never had a sequel. So what would a modern day take on Space Station Silicon Valley look like? Well, if you haven't figured it out already, that is exactly what I decided to find out. Actually, that's what we decided to find out. I managed to rope my 3D artist friend Slode into this project, and we began to discuss what a Space Station Silicon Valley remake might look like. This is part 1 of our series on remaking Space Station Silicon Valley. So here's the plan. We'll be remaking 1 level from the original game, I'll be streaming the entire process on Twitch, we'll be building it in Godot, making a short devlog series out of it, and we'll be putting the entire game online to play for free once we're done. Assuming that is that we don't get some kind of cease and desist. So where do we start? Let's talk art style. In redesigning some of the characters, we wanted to take a lot of creative liberty while still staying true to the wacky, cartoony models of the original game. And as we were researching and reading up on the game's development, there was a particular quote that caught our attention immediately. The game's humor and style were shaped by hardware limitations. When the hardware rendered the character models in soft focus, the team noted that they resembled plasticine models, and continued to create the game with a look and style akin to Wallace and Gromit. So the original character designs were inspired by a claymation series? What if we took that further? What if the whole game looked like a claymation film? And that could work perfectly with the wacky character design of the original game. We would have to find a way to achieve the noisy, moving clay textures on our materials and change our animations so they look choppy, like they were shot frame by frame. Combined with the metallic spacecraft materials, that could look really cool. So, with our aesthetic decided, Slode began work on some procedural clay materials while I began the very important work of playing through the game. In order to find the perfect level to recreate, I'd have to play through every single level of the original game. And that's when I realized why young Solomon never beat this game. This shit is hard. Like, really hard. Not in a Dark Souls enjoyable kind of way, like frustratingly hard. Like, did anyone besides the main programmer beat this level kind of hard? But after beating the whole game, there was one level in particular that stuck out to me. First of all, it has the best song on the whole soundtrack. I mean, just listen to this organ, okay? Secondly, it's got a huge variety of characters. You've got a penguin who can run and swim and glide. You've got a polar bear with tank treads. You've got a quirky pigeon character who can fly and pick up other characters. It's even got a skiing wolf and walrus. Wait, skiing wolf and walrus, why does that sound familiar? Anyway, after finding the perfect level, it was time to start writing some freaking code. First thing I wanted to do was get the feel of the game by starting work on movement physics. One of the coolest parts of the original game is how every character moves differently. The walrus feels like driving a bouncy jet ski. The pigeon doesn't just walk on the ground, he hops. So priority number 1 is making sure every character in our remake feels unique. Now, if you've implemented character movement in Godot, you'll know that it doesn't come with any out-of-the-box solutions for this. Without any custom code, the character body 3D class doesn't move at all, but it does give you the basic building blocks to make your own movement logic. And the most important building block is this one, move and slide. So basically, our job is to modify velocity by applying forces before calling this function every physics frame. We'll do things like adding acceleration when you press the control stick, adding gravity when you're in the air, adding buoyancy when you jump in the water. I've made a few platformers in Godot, and this is always my favorite part. And I have my work cut out for me with this project because we're going to write different movement physics functions for each character to make them feel as unique as possible. The first character we'll be featuring in this video is the penguin. On top of swimming and jumping, the penguin can also deploy a parachute that helps him glide across gaps. Now, in the game, the penguin also has a snowball attack, and it does a very small amount of damage, but I actually decided to take this out completely. This attack is so weak and hard to aim, it's just not fun to use, and it ends up feeling tedious. Give me like 5 minutes to kill this fish. Instead of trying to improve the snowball attack, I thought it'd be more interesting to introduce a new ability that makes the penguin more of a crafty, agile character. I worked on that later, so we'll come back to that. Another critical gameplay feature to nail down right away was Evo's ability to possess different characters. In the original game, when Evo ejects from a character, the character has a powering down animation where they kind of collapse into a heap. How could we make this a bit more convincing and a bit less static? It was time to add a feature that would become a video game staple in the 2000s. Ragdoll physics. This change, I think, will make the reanimation ability so much more satisfying, and it even has some interesting gameplay implications. For example, what if Evo ejects from an animal on the side of a cliff? Now you've got to jump down and go get it. In fact, the level we're remaking has a pigeon character who can pick up and drop other characters. This could be a lot of fun with ragdoll physics, and you can just imagine the other physics-based puzzles you could make based around this feature. I'm not going to go into too much detail about the pigeon quite yet though, since we'll be saving him for a future devlog. Now, the second character we'll be working on in this devlog could not be more different. This is the polar bear tank, and I'd be lying if I told you I didn't go down a development rabbit hole with this one. The concept is pretty simple, polar bear body plus tank treads. The problem was that I saw this video and decided, yeah, I'm gonna try to do that. And so I began the nearly week-long process of adding wheels with real suspension and deforming tank treads to our polar bear. It's just one of those dev challenges that's really too fun to say no to. Instead of physically modeling and moving the tank treads, I've just added the scrolling texture to the wheels of the tank, and later we'll add some proper tank tread normals to these. The tank was a lot of fun to work on because it controls very differently from all the other characters. It's got a total of 8 wheels that all apply forces to the tank's body to help it turn and give it suspension. You can see that when the joystick is pressed all the way to the right, for example, the tank turns by applying forward force with the left set of wheels and backwards force with the right wheels, as opposed to something like a car that turns by rotating its wheels. Finally, the tank treads are made squishy by a series of ray casts that look for the ground and move bones in the polar bear's skeleton. Okay, so there's plenty more to do on the tank, but I took a quick break to work on a feature that seems to haunt me wherever I go. Interactive snow. This endless time sink of a feature kicked my ass countless times in Super G, but because I have no regard for my own sanity, and because I approach programming problems like Homer Simpson approaches boxing, I decided to take one more dip into the abyss.
No, he's getting killed! He's gonna die on his feet!
I can't watch this.
I was really hoping that I could get away with using decals for prints in the snow, and for footprints I think this could be plenty good enough. But the problem started with the tank treads. Because the decals are just kind of imprinted one on top of another, it creates this mess. And try as I might, I could never get rid of these crazy flickering issues. We were going to need a height map to draw snow imprints on, and a custom snow shader. Luckily, I found a Godot example that was a great start. The concept is pretty simple. We have a particle system moving and emitting particles. This would be attached to the character in the game. These particles are only visible to a camera that exists underneath the scene. Then, this camera's viewport, aka its camera feed, is passed to our custom snow shader, and the shader uses this texture as height data to offset the vertices and affect the shading of the snow. So it looks like imprints have been made. In fact, for the sake of performance, I won't actually be deforming the snow, but just adjusting the normals to affect the lighting. You can see with the height map approach, the overlapping paths look a lot better. And then, by simply making the particles fade out over time, the snow prints will naturally fade out behind you. If anyone wants to know more about how I implemented the snow shader, let me know, it might be a fun topic for a tutorial video. Returning to our polar bear, it was time to add some firepower. In the original game, the tank shoots projectiles from his mouth, but we thought it would add a lot more depth and would help emphasize his robotic side if we gave him a rotating cannon on his back. And the fun part about this is, because he's a rigid body, we can apply recoil forces to really sell the power of the cannon, though we might need to be careful of how much recoil. But with that done, it was time to begin work on the character models. Maybe it's my programmer background, but I have a very iterative approach to character design. I like to test the model's scale and proportions in-game before I commit to anything, and this version of the penguin was much closer to the in-game model. We did away with the arms and gave him that curvy bowling pin shape, and of course, massive feet. I modeled a couple different shapes of the feet before I decided that the most basic blob version actually looked the best. We made some pretty significant changes to the polar bear's design, messing around with different body shapes and mechanical pieces. Thanks to everyone who helped contribute concept art and gave feedback along the way. Stick around at the end of the video if you want to see some other crazy fan art. And here is the polar bear tank, complete with chonky wheels, an angry mechanical jaw, derpy eyes, and a massive cannon strapped to his back. He hasn't been properly textured yet, but we hope you can see the potential. We're still working on the projectile that comes out of the cannon. I'm hoping we can do something really cartoony with that. Additionally, the polar bear has a secondary ability where he lays a turd-shaped landmine behind him when he's driving around. If anyone has any funny ideas about what we could do with this ability, let us know in the comments or in Discord. And here is where we are with the penguin. Again, he's not textured yet, but the shape is there. You'll notice he has these little bolts around his stomach because this chest piece is made of metal plating, and we'll probably add a bunch of technology details there, things like buttons and glowing lights and stuff. In the original, the penguin looks just like a normal penguin, and if you didn't know the story behind the game, you probably wouldn't even realize that this is a robot penguin. We really wanted to emphasize the mechanical, hybrid nature of all these animals in the remake. For example, the parachute now comes out of a hatch in the penguin's head, and we think this goofiness fits the spirit of the original game. Oh, and the new ability I mentioned earlier, that is the slide ability. Adding the slide made moving around as the penguin way more satisfying, so we ended up going a bit wild with this. We added the ability to dive mid-air and even do a dive cancel flip to get a bit more height. This movement combo, combined with the parachute, is kind of addicting. Now, you probably noticed our little computer chip attached to the back of the penguin, and that all came from an idea that Slode had. I'll let him explain.
In the original game, evil possessing host animals looks a little like this. It's pretty simple and it worked for the time, but what if we design the characters with Evo in mind? If we have a spot on each animal where Evo can attach to, we can animate Evo's jump and show him plugging in and taking control. On top of looking really cool, this also helps visually distinguish AI-controlled animals from the player-controlled versions. Just imagine the cool idle animations Evo can have here now that he's more front and center. We've also prototyped some visual effects to help indicate the attachment point and let the player know which character they are in range of. I also wanted to talk about some of the materials and environment design I'll be doing on this project. We're going for a hand-sculpted claymation look for most of our organic materials, so I've been making tileable materials for this, and I'll be sharing a lot more in the next devlog. We'll also be incorporating highly detailed, realistic materials like the ice on these giant ice cubes. Most of the projects we've been done together tend to be stylized, flat materials meant to avoid realism, but we both really like how the realistic textures help sell the miniature feeling we've been going for.
Alright guys, that's about where we're leaving it for Devlog 1. The idea is that this is going to be a mini devlog series, and we'll be rapid prototyping this demo over the next couple months, so be sure to join the Discord and tune into the live streams if you want to influence the outcome of this project. Also, be sure to subscribe here on YouTube because I'm going to be cranking out these videos the next couple months. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you soon.